This video is about the story of Mark and John. These are not the real names of the two teenagers from Manchester in England. Their real names remain a secret to protect them. Accordingly, there are no pictures of them. But the case is so incredible that you still won't be able to take your eyes off the screen. You have never heard of anything like this case before. One day, the two boys were out and about in Manchester together. To outsiders, Mark and John might have looked like two ordinary friends spending an evening together. But this evening was anything but ordinary, because one of the two boys pulled a knife. He looked the other in the eye and said, "I love you, brother." Then he plunged the knife into his friend's upper body with full force. How did it come to this? And why is this case so unbelievable? Like so many young people in the early 2000s, 14-year-old John spends a lot of time in chat rooms. However, his internet consumption is so excessive that he even neglects his own sleep and meals in order to be online longer. He's mainly online at night and sometimes chats with up to 20 or 30 different people at the same time. At some point, a boy called Mark, who is 2 years older, joins the conversation. Mark and John hit it off immediately. They have similar interests and start to exchange messages regularly. Both have webcams and can thus see each other at least virtually. Just like John, Mark is almost addicted to the chat rooms. He's online for up to 12 hours a day, writing with his internet friends. Not only with John, but also with many other virtual friends. On June 28th, Mark is back in the chat room. He's writing with an internet friend named Janet Dobinson. The two have been chatting for months. Janet is 44 years old and works as a secret agent. She asks the teenager to carry out an assassination. "You want me to kill him?"
"Yes."
"And just let him die?" "What should I say to him?"
"You love him."
"I love him. But this has to be done?"
"Take him to a quiet place. Buy a knife, gloves."
When he has committed the murder, she would meet him at the police station, according to Janet. Mark is not supposed to commit the murder on just anyone, but on his online friend John, who is 2 years younger. The following day, June 29th, 2003, is sweltering hot in Manchester. Summer has arrived and people are enjoying the good weather on this Sunday. In a small cul-de-sac called Goose Grand, however, everything is quiet. Hardly anyone goes there. Presumably, it is eerily silent. Until you hear the screams of a teenager. When the emergency services arrive, they find John and Mark in the small alley. Mark is visibly shaken as he stands next to his seriously injured friend. John is in a very bad way. Fortunately, a stab wound in the chest is only superficial. Another wound in the abdominal cavity, however, is a full 15 centimeters deep. The stab wound also injured the teenager's liver and kidney. He is suffering from severe internal bleeding that is life-threatening. John's friend Mark states that a young man approached them and suddenly began stabbing John. He is also able to provide a description of the perpetrator. He was in his mid-20s, wearing a black hoodie and black jeans. After a few days in a hospital in Manchester, John's condition stabilized. His parents tried to get John to talk to a psychologist about the stabbing, but there were no available psychologists. John was put on a waiting list. He would have to wait at least 4 months for an appointment, his parents were told. Instead of a psychologist, John's parents and the police are now trying to get something out of the 14-year-old. When John is able to speak again after 4 days in the intensive care unit, he slowly begins to talk about what happened. However, he changes his statements several times. But finally, John changes his statement one last time. And now he incriminates his friend Mark, who is 2 years older than he is, heavily. John describes the attack as follows. Mark was standing next to him and stabbed him in the stomach. He held John and stabbed him again. When John went to the ground, Mark knelt next to him and told him to trust him. John asked him to call an ambulance. He would die. Mark then said, "Shh, other people will hear you, please be quiet." John started screaming, "You've killed me!" Mark replied, "Don't say that. Don't let that be the last thing you say." John says he fought for his life for about 20 minutes while Mark stood by his side. Then Mark finally called the police and gave the officers the description of the alleged perpetrator when they arrived. The description of a perpetrator who, according to John's new statement, does not even exist. It was only his friend Mark who attacked him. The police also come to this conclusion because a surveillance camera is pointed at Goose Grand. It films everyone who enters the cul-de-sac. And on June 29th, 2003, Goose Grand is entered by only 2 people, Mark and John. The alleged stranger in a black hoodie is not visible on the camera footage. So Mark is arrested for the attempted murder of his friend John. After a few days, John is released from the hospital. His injuries will cause him problems for a while, but he's on the road to recovery and can continue his recovery at home. The security camera at Goose Grand remains intact even after the attack on John. The police occasionally watch the tapes, and one time they notice something strange. Because 14-year-old John, who was stabbed, keeps returning to the scene of the crime. Something is not right here. At the end of 2003, not only Mark is on trial for the attempted murder of his friend John, John himself is also charged with the same allegations. Yes, you heard right. It is the first time in British legal history that someone has been charged with the attempted murder of himself. And the story of Mark and John's case is incredible. During the trial, it is revealed that John has built up an unprecedented construct of lies. John is the boy who was stabbed. He invented dozens of fake people, using their identities to chat with Mark in the chat rooms. He had a separate idealect, an extensive background story, quirks and idiosyncrasies for each individual character. A police data specialist testifies that John's various online personas were so subtly crafted that even she, as an expert, could not have recognized that all of these personas originated from the same brain. When John first contacts Mark, he pretends to be a young woman named Rachel. He makes sure that Mark develops feelings for Rachel. Then he himself enters the chat room and introduces himself as Rachel's brother, even though Rachel doesn't actually exist. For John, this is the perfect excuse to develop a closer relationship with Mark and gain his trust. But when Mark asks Rachel to meet up, John is in a tight spot. As already mentioned, Rachel doesn't actually exist. So John claims that he and his supposed sister Rachel are being threatened by a stalker. This stalker wants to kill them both and assault them. Although Mark has never seen John and Rachel in his life, these internet acquaintances are so important to him that he wants to do everything he can to help them. John claims that the stalker is demanding masturbation videos from him. Mark offers to record these videos instead of John and thus satisfy the stalker. And that's exactly what he does. But John explains to Mark that the stalker had already found and killed Rachel. Mark's attempt to help had come too late. John writes to him, "He kicked her in the stomach, held her head under water, then out, freezing cold. She bled through my sheets. You weren't there for her, no matter how much she screamed for you." What sounds outrageous in retrospect and like an obvious fake is supposed reality for Mark at the time. It should not be forgotten that the case took place in 2003, when there was hardly any education about the dangers of the internet. Mark believes that everything John invents really exists. And with that, he also knows that Rachel, the girl he fell in love with in the chat room, was murdered. He has no way of knowing that Rachel never existed and was only invented by John. Over the next few weeks and months, John keeps inventing new personas that he introduces to the chat room and unleashes on Mark. Lindsay East, Rachel East, Kevin McGregory, Dave McNeil, and finally the alleged secret agent Janet Dobinson. None of these people really exist. They were all invented by John. But they are so convincing that 16-year-old Mark never doubts their existence for a second. What's more, he even feels attracted to them. And when the supposed secret agent Janet Dobinson attests to Mark's potential as an agent, he feels flattered. He could become an agent and a millionaire as early as next year. John promises him under his online identity. At the same time, Mark and John begin to meet in real life. John still pretends to be the brother of the fictitious Rachel, who was supposedly murdered in cold blood. In court, John testifies that he himself was surprised that Mark believed his invented universe. John admires Mark. The older boy is good-looking and John is attracted to him. At the same time, however, he feels that he is not enough for him. Mark stays at John's house once. The two also get physically close during this visit. Sometime later, John sets Mark on himself under the identity of top agent Janet Dobinson. John allegedly has a brain tumor and will die soon anyway. He would leave behind several billion British pounds, and British intelligence is therefore on high alert. His alleged billions would be in a safe at the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean that is only accessible through a numerical code. John is the only person in the world who knows this code. If Mark were to kill John and elicit the safe combination, Mark would receive £80 million and a job in British intelligence. The then Prime Minister Tony Blair would certainly be grateful for his service to the country. To support this story, the real John Mark also writes that he has a deadly brain tumor and is not doing well. When the police uncover all of this over the course of several weeks, the investigators are stunned. There has never been a case like this before. Because Janet Dobinson, the alleged agent, is just one of John's inventions. He has, in a manner of speaking, commissioned his own murder. Or did Mark instigate it? Mark only learns in court that all the people he has been chatting with for months do not exist. That they were all just inventions of John. His internet love Rachel, the alleged agent Janet, and numerous other people, to some of whom he had confided his most intimate secrets. As much as one can reproach Mark for his naivety, at this moment of revelation, a world must have collapsed for him. John invented all these people only so that they could all together convince Mark to murder him. And the reason is relatively simple. John no longer wanted to live. He had suffered from severe depression since childhood and had trouble coping with everyday life even as a teenager. He saw no way out for himself and therefore wanted to convince Mark to murder him, so that his life would come to an end. In court, both Mark and John were found guilty. Since both are minors, they both got off with a suspended sentence and a lot of conditions. Neither of them is allowed to use the internet unsupervised anymore. Furthermore, neither of them is allowed to contact each other. This case is probably one of the most bizarre criminal cases we've had on the channel so far. It was very fortunate that the attempted murder that John staged against himself failed. He almost destroyed not only his own life, but also Mark's. I would be interested to hear your thoughts on the case. And I'm curious to see if you think the intro is too clickbaity or honest. For me, this is really a case that we have never seen on the channel before. It's such an absurd story that I almost didn't believe it the first time I read it. I checked all the sources again just to be sure. But it's true. It happened exactly like that. Feel free to leave me a comment and let me know if you think the case is the same. By the way, you also support the channel. because any activity stimulates the algorithm and ensures that this video is suggested to new viewers who have not yet subscribed to Insolito. And of course, I would be very happy about that. Otherwise, there is not much more to say. I wish you a good morning, afternoon, or evening. Or depending on when you watch the video, and I hope to see you again in the next video. Until then. Ciao, guys.